The new thriller Sinners opens with a haunting, rain-soaked scene and wastes no time plunging viewers into the uneasy world of Andy, an outsider whose point of view colors the entire experience. Personally, what immediately draws me in is the gritty realism of the setting. The sense of atmosphere is thick, dark forests, empty roads, and the kind of small-town desolation that always promises secrets just beneath the surface. There's a palpable tension from the start, heightened by the sharp cinematography and subtle sound design. As Andy moves through these spaces, there's a growing sense of foreboding, and the film skillfully builds suspense without relying on cheap jump scares. The strongest aspect of Sinners is its narrative structure. Rather than spoon-feeding the story, the film immerses us directly into Andy's fragmented perspective. The audience is left piecing together events as Andy does, navigating moments that blur the lines between memory, paranoia, and cold reality. Personally, I really appreciate how the director chooses to trust the audience with this unreliable narrator approach. It gives the film a sense of authenticity and encourages the viewer to pay close attention. On the flip side, though, this same narrative choice does come with drawbacks. Because the film omits a lot of traditional exposition, it can be confusing at times, especially for those used to straightforward storytelling. Some viewers might find themselves frustrated, wanting more answers or wishing the pacing was a little faster in certain sections. As the plot unfolds, Andy finds himself tangled in a conspiracy that seems both deeply personal and chillingly universal. The film introduces a cast of morally ambiguous characters, some victims, some villains, but most operating somewhere in the morally gray area suggested by the title Sinners. The tension escalates steadily, punctuated by moments of surprise that kept me guessing. There's a particularly clever twist at the midway point. What seemed like a random act of violence is revealed to be part of a much larger pattern. This moment genuinely surprised me, shifting my expectations and forcing me to reconsider the motivations of nearly every character introduced so far. The film does a great job seeding clues early on, so the twist feels earned rather than forced. In terms of adult content, Sinners walks a careful line. The violence is intense, at times graphic, but never gratuitous. Each act drives the story forward. Nothing feels included just for shock value. There are several scenes with strong language and thematic elements dealing with addiction, betrayal, and guilt. Intimate content is present but handled tastefully. The director uses implications and suggestive framing instead of explicit imagery, which keeps things within the boundaries of most mature audiences while still conveying emotional stakes. As a content creator, I found the choices here to be respectful of the material without crossing into exploitative territory. For viewers looking for family-friendly fare, however, Sinners is squarely aimed at adults and is best avoided by younger audiences. The film's pacing overall is a bit uneven. The first act is slow burn, methodically establishing mood and character backgrounds. This could be a double-edged sword. Personally, I enjoyed the detailed world-building and tension, but I can see how some might find it dragging a little. The second act delivers a series of escalating set pieces and narrative reveals that accelerate the tempo, creating an addictive sense of momentum. The finale is explosive, and while it doesn't tie up every loose end, it gives just enough resolution to feel satisfying without being overly neat. What I genuinely like about Sinners comes down to its ambition. It refuses to talk down to the audience or play it safe with genre conventions. The script is sharp, filled with snappy dialogue and memorable lines, and the sound design uses silences and subtle ambient tones to great effect. The actors deliver performances that are raw and believable, especially the supporting cast who manage to convey layers of complexity in just a few scenes. The sense of place is vivid, and the camera makes you feel immersed in Andy's world. Whether you're trailing him through shadowy alleyways or following him into tense, wordless confrontations. However, it's not all positive. Where the film falters for me is in a few underdeveloped subplots, certain character arcs that are introduced with promise but don't fully pay off. For example, there's a secondary antagonist whose motivations are hinted at but never fully explored, and a missed opportunity with a late-stage reversal that could have added even more emotional depth. The ambiguity is a stylistic choice, but it may leave some viewers unsatisfied, as the final scenes raise almost as many questions as they answer. From an entertainment content perspective, Sinners offers a lot of hooks for discussion: moral ambiguity, questions about justice, cycles of violence, and the cost of carrying personal secrets. There's also a striking use of motif and symbolism throughout. Recurring images of broken glass, religious iconography, and decaying architecture all feed into the movie's central theme of redemption and damnation. These visually driven storytelling elements make the film ideal for scene breakdowns and in-depth analysis. In several key moments, what looks like a straightforward thriller detour turns instead into carefully constructed moral dilemmas, keeping both Andy and the audience off balance. Is Sinners worth watching? For those who appreciate dark, thoughtful thrillers willing to take creative risks, it absolutely is. The surprising narrative swings, layered performances, and mature themes all combine for a viewing experience that lingers long after the credits roll. It's not the kind of film that offers simple answers or safe catharsis. Instead, it invites viewers to sit with uncertainty and reflect on their own responses to the characters' choices. Audiences who prefer tight pacing and clear resolutions might struggle with the film's more ambiguous moments, but if the idea of layered, conversation-starting cinema appeals, Sinners will not disappoint. A standout scene for me comes about two-thirds of the way through the film. Andy, cornered in an abandoned warehouse, faces an antagonist who forces him to confront his past mistakes directly. The dialogue crackles with tension, and the scene is shot in a single unbroken take. This immersive approach draws the audience into Andy's emotional state, blurring the lines between victim and perpetrator. The stakes are high, violence is implied rather than shown in detail, which paradoxically makes the moment feel all the more tense. It's a perfect example of the film's ability to deliver suspense without resorting to cliches. But what makes Sinners unique isn't just the structure or the plot twists. There's a moral complexity here that sets it apart from more conventional thrillers. Every character, even the most outwardly sympathetic, is revealed to have secrets and contradictions. The script is particularly strong in its use of dialogue. Exchanges feel natural but are layered with subtext. Quick moments, a lingering glance, a line that doesn't quite fit, invite the viewer to look deeper. One thing I didn't like, though, was the film's occasional tendency to veer into melodrama, especially in the final act. Some of the emotional climaxes felt a bit overwrought, which broke immersion for me. The technical side of Sinners deserves praise. The soundtrack is understated but effective, building tension with minimal cues and never overshadowing the performances. The editing maintains suspense while allowing quieter, contemplative moments to breathe. Lighting choices, harsh fluorescence in interrogation scenes, cold blue hues at night, are consistently thoughtful, reinforcing the narrative's emotional undertones. The filmmakers skillfully avoid horror movie tropes, instead rooting the story in psychological realism. On the subject of surprises, Sinners manages to avoid the biggest pitfall of twisty thrillers. Everything feels motivated by character, not simply the need to shock the audience. While the central reveal is genuinely unexpected, it plays fair. Viewers paying attention will catch subtle hints building up to the climax. There are a few red herrings, but none feel like cheap misdirection. The effect is one of growing paranoia. As the narrative progresses, both Andy and the viewer become increasingly unsure of who to trust. Adult audiences should note that while the film confronts dark subject matter, violence, addiction, betrayal, it does so with restraint and purpose. The violence, though sometimes graphic, is handled in a way that feels impactful rather than exploitative. There are a handful of scenes containing strong language, drug use, and adult conversations, all integral to the narrative. Rather than sensationalize these themes, the film uses them to probe deeper human questions about redemption and self-forgiveness. For those curious about industry relevance, Sinners is also notable for its independent production values. There's a rawness to the filmmaking that feels refreshing, especially when compared to bigger-budget studio thrillers. It has the hallmarks of modern indie cinema: loose, naturalistic performances, a willingness to linger in uncomfortable moments, and a focus on character psychology over spectacle. The risks don't always pay off, and the film's ambitions occasionally exceed its reach, but that very unpredictability is part of what makes Sinners memorable. If you're a fan of story-driven thrillers that invite reflection and analysis, Sinners is well worth seeking out. Or, if you're simply looking for a tense, atmospheric ride that leaves you with more questions than answers, this one certainly delivers. Just prepare for content that is unapologetically adult. This is a film that will challenge audiences rather than coddle them. As always, for more in-depth breakdowns like this and the latest indie thriller reviews, make sure to hit that subscribe button and enable notifications so you never miss a deep dive. Drop a comment with your own thoughts on Sinners. What was your favorite twist? And did you find the ending satisfying or frustrating? Stay tuned for more breakdowns, scene-by-scene analyses, and exclusive interviews coming soon to the channel.